Hi, everybody. Welcome back. This session of Beyond Getting Started. This is our fourth segment. Thanks for coming back. Today, we are going to look at dates and date functions and how to use them. Why don't we go ahead and get started? First, just a little bit about me. If we haven't met before, my name's Jim Dehner. I am a three-time Tableau Visionary. I am a seven-time Forum Ambassador, and I co-lead the Tableau Newbie User Group and the Nashville Tug. Let's start talking about dates. Dates are a very special class of dimension in Tableau because they self-sequence and they self-sort. And beyond that, they can also be used in date functions. So it's really important that we understand dates. And there seems to be a lot of confusion about dates and how they're used. And we're going to get into that today. First of all, dates in Tableau have a basis just the same way as they're done in spreadsheet calculators, be it Excel or be it Google Sheets or any other spreadsheet calculator. They pretty much all work the same. They're based on a floating point number, a whole number that's embedded in Tableau, and that floating point number is tied to a date hierarchy. And the whole part of that number represents the year, the quarter, the month, and the day. And the decimal part of that number is the fractional part of a 24-hour day, and it represents the hours, the minutes, and the seconds. Now, the way Tableau works and the way all the other spreadsheet calculators work is you pick a date part that you want to look at, and Tableau is able to pull that up based on this overall hierarchy. But you'll notice there's some date parts that you use, and you kind of use them frequently, that aren't in that hierarchy. And those include week, weekday, and this one is seldom used, but I do use it a lot. It's called day of the year. Week represents the week number. And the reason it's not as part of the hierarchy is because it doesn't fit into a calendar that includes month and day. Months don't always start on the same day of the week. Uh, there's not an even number of weeks in a month, so they don't fit into the hierarchy. Likewise, weekday is literally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, and that doesn't fit into the calendar also. Now, day of week is kind of a very cool date part. January 1st is day one. December 31st is day 365, except of course for leap year, and day of the year accounts for that. It comes back at 366. But this date part is used in all the date functions. It's what you use to specify the part of the date that you want to use in your work. Let's take a look at how the syntax for those date functions and how they might look. They all start out with a keyword, and that keyword is the function itself. We're going to take a look at what those keywords are, but here I'm using an example, a date name. Then inside the parentheses, the first argument is that date level. It's the date level from the hierarchy. It's month, it's year, it's quarter, whatever. The second argument is your date dimension. It could be an order date, a shipping date, but it is the actual date dimension. And that date dimension must be a real date. It can't be a string that represents a date. It has to be a real date. And then some of the functions have an option for changing the start of the week. Here in the US, the week starts on Sunday and ends on Saturday. If I wanted to change that so that my week started on Monday, for example, I could change it right here by changing the start of the week. Now, the syntax here is kind of important. The date level is always enclosed in quotes. There can be single quotes or it can be double quotes. It just can't be a mixture of the two. And it's always lowercase and it is singular. It's month, not months. It's day, not days. Likewise, the start of the week is always lowercase. It's enclosed in quotes, and it's always singular. Now, I like to group date functions into four different groups based on what they return. The date functions themselves either return a date, a real date, and they're date trunc and date parse are two date functions that return a real date. Like it will return November 18th, 2023, a real date. We can use date and make date to convert strings into real dates. And that becomes an important part when you have when your date dimensions aren't real dates, but they represent strings. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. There are also date functions that represent a reference to the date. It's not the date itself, but it's a reference to the date. And like date name is like January, February, March. Great for using labels. If you want to put a label on something, date name is a good example of how to do that. Date part, January is 1, December is 12. And you can use those in calculations. You can also use them in text and the like. Year, month, day, all return an integer value for the actual date itself. There are functions that you use to do date math. There's date add, where we want to increment a date. We want to increase a date by a month or a year, or decrease by a month or a year. We would use date add to do that. Or date difference, when we want to calculate the difference between two dates. And we can do that at any level. We can look at how many days are between two dates, or how many months are between two dates. And then there's two special date functions. There's today, which returns the date, and there's now, which returns a date time, and they're both tied to your system clock. So let's take a look at how we would go about using some of these. And I want to talk first about continuous dates and discrete dates. I know there's a lot of confusion about the discrete dates and continuous dates. And if you remember way back in segment 1, we were talking about blue pills and we were talking about green pills. We were talking about discrete and we were talking about continuous. Well, dates fall into that category. They can either be discrete or they can be continuous, and they function different in Tableau. And I want to show you how we go about using them and selecting the date part that we want to look at. I'm going to start with the discrete date. And I've just created a little line chart here. I've got year of order date on the columns, and I'm just using Superstore data again. And I've just got a line that we've used here. If I open this pill up by opening up the down arrow there, this drop down opens up, and the part of this drop down represent discrete date parts. Okay, it's like using date part, if you will, or date name. These are all discrete parts. The lower part of this chart is continuous date charts. They'd be like date trunc, okay? And they'd end up being a green pill. Now, right now, we have on this chart, we have a blue pill, a discrete dimension for year. And if we open this up, you can see we've got year and quarter, and we can open it up again and we can see year, quarter, and month. And the question usually comes about is, wow, I got these breaks in the chart, and I'd really like to see all those lines connected. Well, what you're really saying is I'd like to see a continuous line. To get a continuous line, we use continuous date function and not a discrete function. The discrete functions categorize information. If you remember what we learned in segment 1, discrete functions are used to categorize information. Okay. The continuous function, and I'm going to show you right here, the continuous function can be used to provide a continuous line. And I can open that function up, and I can look here at a continuous function, and let's just start with year. And we can look at the continuous year, not very dramatic there. But as we open it up, now we can see where the year and the quarter, and you can see year and quarter, and the quarters are all connected. We've got a continuous line as opposed to discrete parts plotted on the same axis. And we can look at month, and now we're looking at a continuous line at the month level. I can also come back, and we use this at time. I'm still going to look at a continuous line, but I want it to be discrete. And I can toggle that between discrete and continuous right here. And I come down here and I now make it a discrete line, and I've got the month of order date as a discrete line, and I've got a continuous chart with I've got a continuous measure, but I'm showing it discretely by converting it to a discrete chart. And you can see here we've got all the months; they're all in order, and they're all sequenced properly. Well, now let's go to the next step. We've got an idea that we've got two different types of dates. We've got discrete dates, we've got continuous dates. We know a little bit about how to work with them and how to change one to the other. But let's take a look at actually using date functions and how that and how that's different between discrete dates and continuous dates. I've just got this chart, and I'm just going to make a text chart. And I've already plotted on this uh, the date name month. And I want to just open this up. And I've created this function, and it's just as date name, and date name is a date function. And let's take a look in the wizard here. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to just look at all the date functions. And you can see there's a lot of them. We're not going to look at each and every one of them, but we are going to look at some of them. We're going to look at these, all these functions work with calendar dates. All of these functions work with ISO dates. Now, here in the US, we don't use ISO dates all that much. I know there's, in Europe, there are some businesses that work on an ISO date. These are all the ISO date functions that are available to you. And then you can see we've got functions also for quarter, year, and week. You might be familiar with that type of function from Excel. Works the same way. Year returns an integer that represents the year, for example. And we've also got now and today. Well, we're going to start with this one. We're going to take a look at the date name for the month on the order date. And all this returns is the month. And it's in text. Like I said before, we can use these for labels, and it works really, really well for labels. I'd like to go ahead and look at the date part month and see how that's different. Here, I'm just going to change this to part. The date part month, and if we take a look at date part, we can read over here that date part is going to return an integer that represents the month. Okay, and if you're not familiar with the calculation wizard, I use it 100% of the time. I would recommend that you use it 100% of the time also. But this will return a number that represents the month itself. So we're going to accept that, and I'm going to place that here on our chart. And you can see we got the numbers 1 through 12. Well, no great surprise there. We're getting the numbers that represent the month itself. We can take a look and we can change this from month. Let's go to a different date part, and we're going to look at quarter. Okay, we can look at the quarter. And now when we do that, we see that each one of these is the first January, February, and March is in the first quarter. So we get one, because now we're looking at day part quarter. We're looking at the first quarter, then the second quarter, then the third quarter, and then the fourth quarter. Well, let's take a look and see what happens when we look at date trunk. Now, date trunk is a continuous function. What it's going to return is the first day of the period. And if we were to look here at the first day of the year of the order date, well, that's January 1st. Okay, and I've just set a filter on this, so we're only going to look at 2023, and I just did that so we're not looking at long lists of data. If we look at the first day of the year, I'm going to drag that out here, and as I drag it out, I'm going to show you how to access different formats here. I just right-clicked and dragged the function onto rows, and I want to see the month, the day, and the year. Okay. And I select that. So we're seeing January 1st, 2023 for all these, for every month of the year. Because date trunc is going to return the first of the level, our case year, based on the order date. I can change this to month, lowercase again, month, and we can see now we're going to see January 1st, February 1st, March 1st. Okay, and I can also change this to any one of the date parts and date part quarter. And I'm going to apply that. So now I get January 1st for all of these for the first quarter of the year, April 1st for the second quarter, July 1st, and October 1st. I love using date trunc whenever I'm making buckets of dates or when I'm doing year over year or year to date calculations or period to period calculations. Date trunc is my go-to date function. I'm very familiar with it and I use it all the time. I know there are other people who are into using date parts and date names. I'm just more comfortable using date trunc. But you can do it either way. I'm going to suggest that you pick one that works for you and get real comfortable with it and then use it all the time. Let's take a look at a couple of other date functions just to see what they do. And I want to take a look at the date name week. Okay. Okay. And I've taken a look and I've got date name week and I've already placed it on the calendar. I've already placed it on the calendar. And I want you to see I want you to see what it's returning. It's returning each week 1 through 52. So we have each week number returned by this date function. The other thing I'd like to put in here, and I've really got to filter this down because it's going to get, I'll just create it from scratch because it's going to create a mess if I don't do this. Let's put in a new worksheet and we're just going to drop it in here. And I want in this worksheet, I'm going to take order date and I'm going to drop order date in here. And I just want to keep 2023. I'm just going to right click this and I'm going to keep it. And then I'm going to right click January and I'm just going to keep January. Okay. And I'm doing this because it's going to create a rather large chart. Okay. And now we've got each record, each order date in January of 2023, each time we have a record and we now know what the order date was, I would like to look and know what day of the week that was. And we can do that by using this function. This is the weekday. This is weekday of the order date. Okay, that's one of those seldom used functions or infrequently used functions. And we know that we now know that the 1st of January was a Sunday, the 6th of January was a Friday, the 7th was a Saturday. We can come back and we can put in that function we were just looking at, where we've got the week in there also, and we'll drop the week in. And all of these dates, we're in the first week, 8 through 14, we're in the second week, and so on and so on. So you can use week and you can use week date, create labels that you're going to use in your analysis, or you can use them to create buckets or to segment the data by weeks or by weekday. And I know some people do that type of analysis. Okay. I've got two more date functions that I'd like to show you, and those are date functions that we use to convert data from strings to dates. Now, let's think for a second on why that's important. it's really important when we get dates or when we get a data set where the data is not necessarily a date itself. It comes in as a string. And I'm going to show you what this data set looks like. I'm going over here to the data source tab and I'm going to open it up. And we can see that the data that we entered into Tableau, it's got a month that ABC means it's text. It's got a text month. It's got a number that represents the year. It's got text for the quarter. It's got this other text that represents a period. Might be an accounting period. You might be working with the finance group, and the finance group works in accounting periods. It's got a year month period, okay? And you're faced with working with those dates, but you don't have real dates, and we need to convert some of these into real dates. Well, the first thing I'm going to suggest to you, let's say you had this accounting period, and it it kind of looks like a date, but it's not a date. The first thing that I try is Tableau's pretty smart, and I'm going to go up here to that icon, and I'm going to click on that icon, and I'm going to try to convert this to a date. And I'm just going to click date, and I'm going to see what happens. And lo and behold, when I do that, I get the first of, it looks like it's the first day of the quarter, and it is because I've got year and quarter in that. Let's go back and see what it looked like. I had year and quarter. So I can convert this to a real date right here, and I can get year and quarter directly from it. Here, I've got year and month of the period. Now, your accounting group might have something that looks like this. Well, let's try it here and see what happens and see if we can make that a date. And I can make that a date. And lo and behold, I get a real date that represents January 1st, February 1st, March 1st, April 1st, and so on. So that's the first thing I'm going to try. Now I'm just going to change those back because I've got some other examples to show you on how, if that doesn't work for whatever reason, if that doesn't work, let's go on to plan B, if you will, and we'll start converting these over. The next thing I would try is I'm going to use date parse. If you remember, we had functions that converted strings to dates. And I'm going to take a look at date parse, and let's talk about how date parse works. Date parse is a function that does that. The first argument in date parse, this right here, is something that you enter, and you define the format that you're going to send the date to Tableau in. And what I've told Tableau here is, first I'm going to send you 4 characters that represent the year, and then there's going to be a dash, and I'm going to send you 2 characters, 2 big M characters, which means I'm going to send you text that means the quarter. And then I'm going to send you the day itself. Now, I don't have those 2 characters here that represent the month, but I'm going to convert that. So let's start with what we have and what we know, and I'm going to put period up here just so we can see what this looks like. I've got this period, and it looks like that. And what I'm going to do in this period is I'm going to write this case statement. And the case statement, well, I'm sorry. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the left 4 characters. Those 4 characters, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to use those as my year. Well, what is this left thing? Left is we're going to take a look at all the string characters here. And left works just like it does in your spreadsheet calculator. It just says, I've got this string, and I'm going to tell you what the string is. I've got this dimension here called period. And what I want you to do, is take the first n characters, the first 4 characters of that from the left, and break them out separate. Okay? And that's what this does. And then, according to and that's text, because we started with text. Next, I need a dash. So I concatenate. This will place the dash in there, right there. Then I need these 2 characters that represent the month. And to get the month, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the right 2 characters. This is the right function, just like we took the left 4 characters. Now we're going over starting at the right side of this period, and we're going to take 2 characters. And when those characters equal Q1, I want a text. And that's why I've included these in single quotes, O1, to be placed in these 2 characters. And I need that to be a text. And I want O1 when it's Q1 when it's Q2. I want O4 for April. Q3 is O7 for July. And then October is the 10th month. And then the last 2 characters, and that ends the case statement. I come back in and I put in another dash, and then I need a text character for the first day of the month, O1. Well, that was a long way to get to where we wanted to be. But once we do that, it will convert this period into a real date. And we know it's a real date because I can look over here and I can see that it is now converted into a real date. Okay, it's actually converted into a date time. Okay, if we just want the real date, we can wrap this in date if we wanted just the real date. Okay. And now we can see that it's just a real date. Okay. And that's how that's done. Well, there's another way of doing it. You might not want to do it that way, and you might have data that's different. And that's by using make date. Make date is a function that's out there that you can use. And I'll tell you right now, there are some data sources that won't allow you to use make date. And in those cases, I use date. But in this example, I use make date, and make date just says, oh, I want numbers. Okay, where date parse said, tell me the format and give me the individual month, date, and year as text. Make date uses real values. It wants the year, the month, and the date in that order. So what I've done here is I've taken make date and the first argument, I've got a year dimension, so I can drop that in. I've got year as a number. Then I've got month, and month was text for January through November, and we've seen that. And I convert that with a case statement. When January, make it 1. When it's February, make it 2. When it's November, make it 11, and everything else make 12. Okay, and those are numbers that are being returned. And then the last value or the last argument is O1 for the last argument. And we can put that in. And we can bring that to the text, and I'm going to put it in as month, day, and year so we can see it. And we've got January, February, March, April, May, June, so on and so forth. The first day of each month of the year. And we converted that text that was sitting there into dates. And once it's dates, we can start using date functions with that real date. We cannot use date functions on strings. Okay, and that's why you may have written a question into the forum and you had dates as strings. And probably if I answered it, the first thing I'm going to say is, hey, if I had this problem, I'd convert it to real dates and I'd start working with real dates. Okay, let's take a look at what we can do with some of those other functions. And I want to show you a year-to-date example. And these are the types of examples and types of things that come up all the time using dates. And the question becomes, well, how can I calculate the year to date and the prior year to date, and then do a variance analysis or a growth based on those two values? And I'm going to show you what the way that I recommend and how I approach this. The first thing I do is I've created a parameter, and I'm just going to show you what the parameter is. It's just simply a date parameter. It's just a date, and I'm going to accept any value into that date parameter. And it happens to be set for November 17th. Okay. This allows the user to open it up. They can change it to any date that they want to change it to, but that's the end date of the current year that we want our year to date to. Okay. Now, for the current year to date, I've written a function, and this is the example of where you would use the date function and how it would work. Okay. I've got this date parameter. It's got a date associated with it. And what I want to do is I want all the dates of the year in the same year as that date parameter and all the dates prior to the date that's in that parameter. I want to sum the sales on all those values. So what I've written here is this does nothing more than saying, we'll take the first day of the year of the order date. Okay, so that's January 1st of the year of the order date. And if that equals January 1st of the year of the parameter, so if they're all in 2023, we pass the first test, we get a true. And also at the day level, take a look at the day of the order date. And is it less than or equal to the day of the parameter? So it's less than or equal to November 17th. Those are all the dates year to date, then sum the sales. So we've done that. And that's this row right, or that column right there. Now I need the prior year dates, and I'm going to do the same sort of thing, but here I'm going to nest, and this is what I wanted to show you. I'm going to nest two date functions together. This first date function is the same. Take all the January 1st of the order date, and is that less than, or is that equal to the year of the order date? But here I've added a date add function, and this is where we're doing some date math. I've got a parameter value that represents the end date of the current year. I want last year, the same date. So I use a date add function, and date add just simply says, well, okay, at what level do you want this? I want it at the year level. And what is the increment? What difference do you want? I want -1. I want last year. So it's -1. And take that -1 in the year from the date parameter. And then I do the same thing for the day. This is the same equation we just looked at for the current year. I've just decremented the year. We're looking at last year now using that same date function, and I get the date for the prior year, and we take all the sales for the prior year, and that's this column right here. And the rest of this is we just do the math. We take the current year minus the prior year, we do the year over year variance. We take the current year minus the prior year divided by the prior year total sales. Okay, that's my go-to approach for doing year over year analysis or period over period. If we wanted to change this looks like a year over year analysis. I think you can see the current, we're going to open this up again. I think you can see on this current year to date, we could do this at the month level. I could take a look at the current month of the order date versus the prior, or versus the month of the parameter, okay, and the day of the order date less than or equal to the day of the parameter. And we're going to calculate a month over month difference. The beauty of this, and some of the reasons I do this, is this accounts for the difference. It's automatically adjust for, like, oh, I'm in January and I want to compare it to December and it's prior year December. Date trunc will automatically make that adjustment because knows if I'm in January of 2023 and I look 1 month prior, the date add function, okay, I look 1 month prior, that's December of 2022. So date trunc is my go-to on doing those comparisons. Well, how about date difference? And this is going to get a little complex here, and I'm going to try to clean it up and make it as easy as possible for us to see. But date difference is a really neat function, and I just calculated the days to ship here, and I want to explain how this works, and I'm also going to show you some areas that you can kind of get into a little trouble with date difference function. All I've done here is I've got a date difference, and date difference just simply says, well, I'm going to take the difference between two dates. I want the difference between the first date and the second date. And you can use the start of the week function here. If you're going to work in weeks, the start of the week function will make a difference. And I'm just going to look at the day function to illustrate what we're talking about here. Now, what this says is take and calculate the number of days between the ship day and the order date. And let's take a look at this guy right here. And we say, well, okay, we'll take a look at the first one. It's easier, okay? From October 19th to October 24th is 5 days. Now, you might say, no, that's 6 days. Because in your organization, you might say, hey, wait, I count the first day and I count the last day. Well, date difference is going to give you 5 days. If you needed 6 days, you add 1 to it, because it's going to give you the difference between the 2 days. It's also doing integer math. Okay, it's doing integer arithmetic, if you will. It's calculating the integer value for the date part, if you will, for the ship date and the order date. And the date part here is 24 minus 19. So it's doing integer math, and that's where it gets the value of 5. It doesn't do, it's not going to come up with 5.5, for example. Well, if you had hours and minutes on this thing and you looked at the date function, and you shipped the thing at 8 in the morning, and the order was received at 8 in the morning, and you shipped it the next day at 8 in the evening, you're not going to get 1.5 days. You're going to get 1 day. Okay. If you needed hours, you can calculate at the hours function, and you'll get the total number of hours, which would be 36 in that. And that's the way you would go about solving that. But I want you to look at this guy. I want you to look at this, and we're going to isolate him in a second. You're going to say, hey, wait a minute, that's 15 days. And you say, no, Jim, that's not 15 days. That's 5 days. What's going on here? Or it's not even 5 days, it's 3 days. Okay. I'm just going to keep that. I'm going to keep that example because I don't want it to get too messy in here. And we've got that order. And what's happening here is we're summing over the number of records associated with that order. And if we were to take a look at that order, we were to take a look at the product, there are 3 product categories involved, and we were to take a look at the product name, there's 3 products in the furniture category, 1 in office supplies and 1 in technology. There's 5 records for that order that was shipped in 3 days. So date difference has returned the value of 3 for each one of those records. And then when we aggregate it with sum, it gets 15. Well, we can pull that out just to show you. When that situation arrives, you can use the average here. And you can see that you got 3. Okay. You have to be careful of that because date difference works at the record level, and it's going to apply that date difference to each record. And in our example here, we had an order with a lot of records in it, and we had a total of 5 records in it, and we ended up with 15 as the total. Okay, I got one more topic that I just want to touch on, and we're only going to touch on it briefly, and that has to do with physical dates. And I'm going to tell you this right now, and then I'm going to tell you it again later. Most date functions only work with calendar dates. They do not work with physical dates. Okay. And I'm going to show you what you can do with Tableau physical dates, or how you can have a physical date calendar, but I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail. Let's take a look at the order date. We were going to take a look at the order date. We were to take a look at quarters, and we were to take a look at months. Okay. It would look something like this. And let's just keep, no, I got to keep, it would look something like this. Okay. January is the first of the first quarter. Now I can change this, and I have done that. I've got a copy of the order date here, for example, here, and I have changed. I've come down here to default property, fiscal year, and let me just take this back. Fiscal year starts in July, which is what I really wanted to show you. Okay, it starts in July, so that in July, we're now in fiscal 2021. And fiscal 2021 runs from July 21 through June of 21. Okay. The calendar year runs from January to December. I'm going to close this off. I'm going to pull this off of there. So we're looking at the physical calendar now, and this is what the physical calendar looks like. If I were to go in and try to do any sort of date function using this, like let's say I use date func year, the copy of the order date, okay? And I go up here and I apply it, and I get the month, day, and year for that. You're going to see that for all of FY 20, in the first half of 21, it returns January 1st of 2020. Even though I told it to look at the physical calendar, date functions won't work the physical calendar. Date functions look back at the actual calendar, the calendar year, and return dates based on that calendar year. So when you start doing the type of analysis that we were trying to do, we were trying to do year over year, a metric, year-to-date metrics analysis, and I was showing you how to use date trunk. It's much more difficult with fiscal years, and it's beyond what we wanted to look at today. I've got a whole blog piece dedicated doing fiscal years, and I'd suggest that that's the place that you would go to look at that, because it's much more involved than just using year-over-year calendar like we do today. That's what I wanted to share with you today. All of this is available on my blog at jimdehner.com, or you could go out to the Tableau public site. Thank you very much. Next section, we're going to look at analytic expressions. Hope to see you there. Bye now.